The biblical Sabbath was established as an exclusive period of divine rest. It requires God's people to cease human labor and enter a designated space of inward-focused worship and sacred stillness. Over the last 2 decades, religious institutions have transitioned from this internal sacred stillness to outward-facing community action, what is sometimes promoted as holy chaos. In the year 2000, the World Sabbath of Religious Reconciliation was established as a grassroots interfaith movement aiming to foster peace and harmony among all world religions. The philosophical architecture for this movement was laid by Vatican II's 1965 declaration, Dignitatis Humanae. Rome created the framework that reframed distinctive religious truth into a universal human value of tolerance. An identical pattern is occurring inside the Adventist Church. In 2013, the General Conference launched Global Youth Day. By 2026, the scale of this initiative involves 24-hour global live streams and slogans like "Be the Sermon," driving toward 100% institutional participation. While the humanitarian intentions driving both the World Sabbath and Global Youth Day appear noble, they employ an identical theological mechanism, inculturation. The mechanism works by keeping the word Sabbath intact so that the vocabulary remains familiar, while the institution dictates the day's physical direction and theological purpose. Through this process, the Church establishes a pattern where human jurisdiction determines the use of God's sacred time. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 3 establishes the foundational biblical parameter for the seventh day. The text defines the Sabbath as a mikra kodesh, a Hebrew term for a holy convocation or a sacred assembly. This diagram illustrates the biblical Sabbath's physical dynamics. Operating as a centripetal force, inward arrows pull elements away from secular environments towards sacred communion. This vector draws believers to divine rest, just as Christ's custom was entering the synagogue. Modern initiatives like Global Youth Day rely on the going out model, which stands in direct contrast to this biblical structure. The vector inverts into a centrifugal force. Arrows explode outward, scattering elements into an expansive grid. This scatters believers away from sacred assembly into organized secular labor, like social media campaigns and public cleanups. By replacing internal stillness with organized outward action, the fundamental vector physics of the seventh day are reversed, altering God's designed architectural purpose. A structural comparison between the ecumenical World Sabbath and the Adventist Global Youth Day exposes the shared logic used to dismantle the Sabbath boundary. First, both retain the word Sabbath while hollowing its biblical parameters, substituting them with either ecumenical harmony or civic service. Next, both erase the sacred secular boundary, filling holy hours with human-directed programs executable any other day. This compromise is made palatable through the golden cup principle. The outer vessel, the label Sabbath, appears golden and holy, making believers feel safe interacting with it. But the contents have been replaced. Instead of divine rest, the cup is filled with human-engineered agendas and secular tools. In this model, the Sabbath survives in name only. Its divine identity is absorbed and redefined by human organizational metrics. This analysis is often met with a specific question: is community service not inherently good and compassionate? Humanitarian actions like feeding the hungry are commanded by God, but they belong to the 6 days specifically designated for human labor. We must distinguish between spontaneous acts of individual mercy and pre-planned, institutionally mandated campaigns. Christ's healing miracles were spontaneous responses to immediate human suffering encountered during the day. Ellen White defines these as holy deeds. On the right is a simple, unprogrammed node representing spontaneous interaction. On the left, an institutionally organized event with scheduled timelines and hashtag deployments locked onto a Saturday. Isaiah 58 prohibits this as doing thine own ways, human logistics overriding divine instruction. When a holy day is filled with institutional logistics and PR metrics, it ceases to be divine rest and becomes human labor. The danger lies in the systematic replacement of divine rest with humanly scheduled agendas during sacred time. To understand how this compromise is executed within an institution, we look to the Balaam blueprint in Numbers 25. Balaam's strategy relied on positive social participation to gradually erase the boundaries between the holy and the common. This timeline maps that strategy onto 4 stages of institutional desensitization: introduction, normalization, expansion, and finally, identity lost. By 2026, an Adventist youth participating in Global Youth Day has absorbed 13 years of institutional messaging, stating that the Sabbath equals organized secular service. This internal inculturation utilizes the authority of the church to train believers that the parameters of the Sabbath are flexible and socially determined. This church-driven conditioning prepares believers for the external threat of a civil Sunday law. Future legislation enforcing a uniform day of rest will utilize the same humanitarian language: community service, family restoration, and the common good. The Heritage Foundation's January 2026 report, Saving America by Saving the Family, provides tangible evidence of this civil language emerging now. The semantic overlap is exact. Global Youth Day argues for community action, while the Heritage Foundation argues for social cohesion. The rhetoric is interchangeable. If a generation is conditioned to accept that church institutions have the authority to repurpose the Sabbath, they will lap a theological defense when civil institutions demand Sunday observance for those same reasons. The Sabbath serves as the exclusive seal of God's authority over time. The core issue remains: who possesses the ultimate authority to dictate what happens during God's holy time? The Sabbath is a sovereign divine decree. To redefine its purpose, even for noble humanitarian reasons, is to usurp the exclusive authority of the Creator.